we start with the panel discussion that we've called Value Added, where we'll learn more about how publishers can partner with each other and collaborate with each other, and have collaborated and partnered with each other in their using their respective strengths. So I'd like to invite to the stage Ananth Padmanabhan, C.P. Vishwanath, Mandira Sen, Rakesh Khanna and Arpita Das. Please come. Alert me and it shall be organized. Okay, wait. Now my notes are all over the place. Okay. I'd like to first make the introductions very quickly. Ananth Padmanabhan is the CEO of HarperCollins India since 2015, where he has focused on creating strategic partnerships for the company with a variety of partners. So we'll hear about that today. He joined HarperCollins after 18 years at Penguin Random House. He previously worked at a bookstore in Chennai for a few years, and he's a published author and photographer. We have Mr. C.P. Vishwanath, who is the co-founder and CEO of Karadi Tales, which pioneered children's audiobooks and produces lovely picture books. And he's also the CEO of Karadi Path Education Company. But do you call it Path or Path? Path, not the Hindi Path. Which is focusing on changing the way language is taught in the classrooms. He's also Director of Pedagogy at Isha Vidya Rural Schools. He's a Carnatic singer and a Mridangam player. Mandira Sen founded Stree and Samya jointly with Popular Prakashan. The first imprint pioneered women's studies publications, and Samya publishes on culture, dissent, social change, and the writings of Dalits. And in 2015, Stree and Samya formed a new partnership with Sage, creating Sage Stree and Sage Samya, where they've already published over a dozen books. Mandira has worked in the publishing industry for over 45 years and has edited books on social sciences and in the general category. She has worked in publishing in the US, in the UK, and in Kolkata. Rakesh Khanna is a publisher, editor, and math educator. I can't underscore that enough. Math educator. He is co-founder and editor-in-chief of Laft Publications, editor of Laft Anthology of Tamil Pulp Fiction, and author of the alternative mathematics book Math Problems for Dinosaurs. He was born in Berkeley, California, and has lived in Chennai since 1998. The session will be moderated by Arpita Das, who runs the independent publishing house Yoda Press. She is also currently visiting faculty at Ashoka University and course leader at the Tejeshwar Singh College of Publishing. She writes for various periodicals and platforms on publishing, book culture, gender, and popular culture. Arpita, over to you.
Hi everyone, it's always brilliant to be here at PubNext, not just because it's in Goa, but because Leo and Queenie put together really the most wonderfully organized publishing business event in this country. I always say that and I maintain it, and the discussions here are something you go away with having learned something, having thought of something that you might not have thought of before, or just having refreshed yourself with some fabulous new ideas. So thank you, Leo and Queenie, for always giving us this opportunity. I have this fabulous panel here, and the first thing I want to say is I have this fabulous panel here of somewhat maverick people, no? Because there's one Ridangam player, there is a mathematician, there is a photographer who also worked in a bookstore in Chennai. I didn't know that. Mandy, what do you do that's mavericky enough? Oh, come on. Huh? Yeah. She has the greenest fingers I know, by the way. And the mango tree is doing really well. Yeah. The reason I'm underlining that is because, of course, publishing, I do believe, is full of people who have multiple truths, and I say that in a nice way, who like to explore different facets of themselves rather than sit in cubicles and crunch numbers, although we do have those as well. But I do feel publishing is made up, is given face and flavor and substance by people like this, which is the fabulous thing about this industry. We're here to talk about collaborations, and the first thing I wrote in an email to my lovely panelists was that, well, considering we wouldn't have any industry if the most vital collaboration didn't happen, which was between author and editor, right? If the author did not come to us and say, I have this great book, publish me, we wouldn't be talking about an industry at all. So the entire industry, in a sense, is built on a foundation of collaborations. Traditionally as well, the industry, like many other industries, grew and became this powerhouse of knowledge production and knowledge dissemination because of wonderful collaborations between the author, the bookmaker, and the bookseller. So collaborations is something we all are very, very serious about, I think, in this industry. At the same time, a lot of people often criticize the Indian publishing industry for being very they don't talk to each other. They're the least united industry, I hear. Sometimes I'm told in Frankfurt, whatever united means. United these days is a bad word if you ask me, but anyway. And I often try to wonder where that comes from. I mean, I know, of course, that we are very competitive, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But at the same time, there are those glitches which we are very aware of, where we don't want to share information, where we don't rather not pick up the phone and talk to each other, and all of that happens. I know I'm talking about collaboration in a more generic sense right now, but I really wanted to flag these things because we're sitting at an event which actually tries to break down those barriers and really tries, in the way Queenie and Leo try to figure out the program, Vinuta and others who work on the program, is to try and make us really talk to each other and share information. And I think that's part of what collaborating in an industry is all about. But as an independent publisher, I would be nowhere if I didn't have fabulous collaborations in my life. And so full disclosure, important collaborations as far as Yoda Press, which is my publishing house, is concerned. The first one that I'd like to flag since I'm here is that we have put most of our backlist now on dog ears on a POD basis, and that is a fabulous collaboration that we have with dog ears, with Leo and Queenie and their team, and it has really helped us tremendously to make our authors happy, to make sure the books are available all the time, to not run after reprints at a time when cash flow has been affected by things like GST. So that's a great collaboration that we have in our lives. I also, like Mandira, we are co-collaborators because Yoda Press also has a collaboration, a joint imprint with Sage called Sage Yoda Press, which is our academic imprint now, and there are some crossover books that go there as well. We started this again in 2014 and it's been a fantastic partnership with tremendous mutual respect and a great sort of, lifesaver is all I can say. And the one that I'm really excited about right now is that we are this week, which is why I can talk about it, starting a similar joint imprint for our trade books with Simon & Schuster India, and that's being inked right now and it's going to be announced by the end of the week. So I'm all for collaborations. I believe it's the way to survive, not just if you're small, but I think if you're big too, if you want really great content to come your way. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that with these fabulous people who have very bravely entered into the realm of partnerships and collaboration. Mandira, I'm going to start with you since I flagged that we are co-collaborators. Mandira, yeah. Should I go back to call you Mandy? Okay. Pick up your mic. So, I want to first go after the elephant in the room, because it was also mentioned in the little write-up to the panel description. This whole thing of big and small. In a sense, I want to sort of get rid of that, after we've discussed it in the beginning. But I want to start with that because there is this sense, there is always, whenever we talk about these collaborations, we always talk in terms of big and small. And obviously, the minute you talk in terms of big and small, there are certain implications there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? These implications, have they come true for you, or how have you dealt with them?
I think it's rare for small and small to collaborate. I think Ritu and I once did an experiment with a book, and it didn't go very far, but it was very delightful when we did it. This was a book on a translation of Sarala Devi Chaudhurani, and Ritu did all the hard work and the production. I think we did the cover, and we sold some copies. We didn't quite know how to get the collaboration going, so we didn't really revive it, right? But generally, smalls look to big. As you've said, a kind of survival strategy. And I have to admit that when I started, I was so naive that I hadn't really planned anything in marketing. So I had the book and I was going around shops and I was going around here and going around there, and it dawned that this is not the way to do things, right? So eventually when we had the collaboration with Popular Prakashan, which are the Bhatkars and I'm the Sen, we were able to access their marketing, which was very important for us. And maybe they're not very big. I mean, they're not big like HarperCollins, but they're middle-sized, or they were then. And they had a whole setup, and they were very, very much focused on the editorial, which suited me because it was run by Ramdas Bhatkar, whom Sudhanva knows well, and he was really a quintessential writer, editor, what have you. I mean, the Marathi list that he brought out is really a dazzling one. So he was very supportive of the new kind of social science we were going to do in Stree, and very supportive when we started Samya with Kancha Elaya's book. So that was, in a way, a very easy collaboration. We ran their Calcutta office, so we got some money for that. We learned how to distribute books because we distributed books in the eastern region. I don't know if we were that great on collections there. I think they had to come in and intercede sometimes. But it really worked fairly well for about 15 years. So that's middle and small. And later when that ceased, it was very difficult for us to manage, although we did then have all these marketing contacts and whatever. But in 2015, when Sage and us got together, it was big. It was a big concern. But Sage is a corporation, as you know. And we're small, I mean, we were about 5 people. It also happened in a kind of informal way, though. Maybe that's the way things happen in India, because the Bhatkals were very close to Mr. Mehra. And actually, he was willing to sign us up.
That's Vivek Mehra.
Yeah, without...
Mr. Mehra, you know, in the publishing industry is a different Mr. Mehra.
Yeah, Vivek Mehra. And he was willing to take us on without actually looking at the books. And I said, what are you taking on? What if you change your mind? Please look at the books. And he said, no, that's fine. I mean, I know what your books are like. But we got him the books. But he was actually looking at them the day we were signing. So he made up his mind.
I just want to also add there that Popular Prakashan also now has a joint imprint with Sage.
Yes, that's how it was.
That was how yours was routed, in a sense.
Well, what happened is that Popular Prakashan under Harsha Bhatkal wanted to sort of get out of publishing, and his great social science list, Kosambi, Courier, A.R. Desai, he was giving to Sage. And he said to me that, well, you know, you could think of Sage, and I'm going to talk about it because it'll suit them very well, and that's how it came about, yes.
Tell us a little bit about it, how it's been.
With Sage?
Yeah.
With Sage, there was kind of surprise on their side and wariness on ours. Surprised that, as they said, the books were so complex. I don't understand this, but when they finally looked at them, said they were very high quality books. They were surprised that this team of 3 or 4 could do all this. Though they had your books before that, right? So maybe they were beginning to realize that small people do very complicated and clever books. Their setup, which is extremely bureaucratic, was extremely daunting. I don't know if you've been through those forms. I never understood them. I used to get the acronyms mixed up. There was something called P2C, then there was something called CSG, then there was something called BIS at the end, which is, I think, book information sheet that goes to their production.
Yeah, but they've simplified them because...
Yeah, there was a lot of clamor from us. And what astonished me here is that they too didn't want to see the manuscripts at all. The form apparently gave them insurance that it's a good book. Then they had, in the bureaucracy, they had 2 reviews here, 1 review there, and I said, we're not doing these things. We know what a book is like on our own, and if we have doubts, we get a review if we're worried about something. They've accepted that, so they become more flexible. They're a little more flexible about letting us do our own, we do our own design, inside, outside. We cannot stop what they call branding, but that could be because we don't understand marketing, as he explained to me. Vivek said, I don't understand branding, which is why the spine always has to have lots of white on it, right? And then there are certain books that cannot have your logo. That also is branding, right? That's the select bit.
Really? So that has changed, and I think we claim...
we fought for that.
We fought for that, and now our logos are on the select books.
And then but there's too much. Anyway, there was a book where I think he said the house was, in the background was a bit hazy, and they made it all straight, like Pythagorean lines. And I said it's hazy because it's about a migrant coming into the city, and her whole view of the city is hazy. This didn't go down well, so it's all straight and geometrical. But after that, they've let us have, they said, oh, you do know how to, this is what I mean about their surprise. You do know how to do things, they said. And then, but it's been good for us because they do the marketing, they do the production. So we give them the edited manuscript, as you do probably. They do the production, they put the doodads.
But you also do the proofreading and the checks yourself.
Absolutely. And all the editor, they also pay the royalties. So the cash situation for us is much better.
Has been fabulous.
I don't know if it's been fabulous.
Yeah. Come on, Mandy, own up. You're getting, okay, let me just...
Now listen, I was always hard up, but I was never indigent.
We have to talk, we have to be fair, right? we're getting an, okay, about full disclosure, right? Because this is a very interesting model which has not, I think, been tried before. They are not distributing for us. They don't have a stake in our companies. They actually keep the chunk of the revenues, but we get an editorial fee and a commissioning fee, and we get commission on sales. I really think as an independent publisher, it couldn't be better.
I think it could be more.
Point taken, Mandy, we'll talk about that and then attack them together. Yeah, okay, so I knew I was right to start with Mandy. Because I don't know, stage here?
No.
They wouldn't raise their hands anyway. They would. No, I have to keep putting things on record as well. It's been fabulous for us. I think we are very good, the smalls, as she calls them. That was the word, polite word for undies at one point. You know that, right? Anyways, the smalls are very good at chipping away at big resistance. You know that, right? And we've done that with Sage as well. But I have to say that Sage has taken it rather well. A lot of other people might not have. And so I'm going to move to Rakesh next.
I just may have one sentence. I think you can chip away because of the books.
Of course, that
Because
is
the
it.
books are so startling,
Of course,
and which they
of course,
cannot do.
of course.
That's why.
Okay, I'm going to, Mandy, there's another point that I sent you guys that is really important. I think we always talk in terms of the lack of respect the bigs have for the smalls. I really want to talk a little bit about the lack of respect we smalls have for the bigs. We never talk about that. And the fact is, if we're talking about collaborations, and completely writing off the bigs as some big money grabbing, money-rich morons, is not the way forward either. I think a lot of intelligent
morons.
people.
What should they be? They do good books too.
Yeah,
No,
but
they're not morons, but it's a situation of inequality, and so there's bound to be all kinds of uncertainties and flapping about and so on.
yeah, sure, Rakesh. We'll move to you next, so that we can hear more on this line, right?
Okay.
I actually want to talk a little bit more with you later about other collaborations, but again, elephant in the room, and we have to deal with that. So what went wrong? How did it happen? How did it move? When did it look good? And then when did it just go downhill? Because in your case, I think there was a stake. It was like buying a stake in the company, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't like that.
Okay.
So,
give us the gories.
So we had started in 2008 and we didn't know anything about publishing or really being business people. We kind of got into it by accident. And a couple of years later, so at the beginning we were distributed by Westland and they had done a wonderful job of distribution. They got us all over the country and a lot of people saw our books. And in 2010, they wanted to stop distributing so many publishers. It was becoming overwhelming for them, and they wanted to restrict their distribution to their own companies. So they proposed that we co-publish, and we would put a Blaft logo and a Tranquebar logo on our books, and we would do it like that. So the deal was that they would give some money for the books up front, and if the first print run sold out, then we would get the rest of it. And but they would do the production. The initial deal was that they would do the production. So the first glitch was that we didn't know a lot about marketing and about the business side of publishing, but I think we did understand production maybe better than we thought we did. Because I don't want to badmouth Delhi, but when we sent that production to Delhi, all kinds of things started happening. Like the book would get the wrong ISBN, and the covers would get, there was an ISBN on the book that had been for another book, and there was strange things happened with covers, and I just realized that in Delhi production, for some reason it seems like you have to micromanage every step of the process, a lot more than we were used to doing in Chennai. Maybe that's.
Are you specifically referring to the typesetter part, the typesetting part of it? Because
I'm not sure where everything went wrong because it's a big.
Because I know Chennai has traditionally had the best typesetters. I know when I was stage 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, we used to send the manuscripts to Chennai by mail to get them typeset there.
Typesetting, I mean, I've been doing myself, but
Right.
I don't,
Okay. So you're talking about the ISBN going on? I mean,
yeah, they put an ISBN on the book that was for another book that had been published the year before, and strange things happened with the covers, and they had to throw away a first print, and there were all kinds of things. And I just realized that actually, like, if you stay in Delhi and you run a business in Delhi, I think there's a level of this that like you have to watch every step, right, to make sure that things don't go wrong. It seems to be part of the business culture in that city.
Not so much.
No? Okay, well, I don't know. This is, yeah. And anyway, so then we changed the deal so that we could bring some of it, the production back to Chennai and use our own printers. So we got a little more money up front to produce the books, and then gave them to Westland to distribute. And that seemed to be going well for some time. And again, like, I don't think, I don't want to blame anybody in the company. I think everybody was doing their best, and it was just a systems thing, which is that we were so small, and it didn't really matter to them whether our books were distributed well. So they had no real incentive to do a good job with our stuff. And then we had weather problems. There was the Chennai floods in 2015, and I think their warehouse got affected, and they had to move everything from one part of the warehouse to the other, so all our books got lost. So if we wanted to get stock to send to bookstores, it was very hard for them to find it. So it was slightly miserable. But I mean, I don't know, it was a learning experience, I guess.
and so it came to an end.
Came to an end.
Amicably?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not mad at anybody at those companies. It wasn't like, yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, come on, Rakesh, talk about it. I mean, say it.
I mean, nobody was a jerk or anything, It was they were huge, and they had so many books in that gigantic warehouse in Mother of Oil, and it was really wet, and they had moved everything from one side of the room to the other, and they couldn't find anything. They couldn't blame anyone for it.
Right, okay. All those beautiful books that you make, my gosh, how much of it was destroyed?
I don't think too much was actually destroyed. Like, I don't think they lost stuff. I mean, things weren't damaged so much as just they couldn't find them.
But did they surface? Finally,
We got most of things back eventually after
right. Okay,
Yeah.
and not damaged.
Most of it we got back. I think there were there are a few hundred copies of everything that are still unknown from
Right,
it.
right. Okay, thanks Rakesh for that. So I think we've given the sort of the, I mean, what could go wrong in a sense. I think that it's good to start from there. But Vish, I'm coming to you next, because you had a slew of very interesting partnerships. Talk us through them a little bit and your experience with them.
In the context of what has been said earlier by you and the co-panelists, in Chennai, if you come in January, you will find a lot of people wearing sweaters and mufflers. That's the Chennaiite.
And camouflage earmuffs.
And earmuffs, yeah. And we have 3 seasons, hottest by anybody else's definition. In the same way, when we talk of bigs and smalls, I would say that there is no big, there is small, smallest. I mean, sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously in terms of, it's also not big by, when you're talking about what is the impact that we can potentially make and what is the impact that we are making, what is the size of the business. And so whenever there are these conversations, and I have a fundamental collaboration that I have with my wife, who comes with a very different approach. So Shobha has a very different view of the industry. I have a different view of the industry, because I don't come from a publishing background at all. And when we talk of collaboration, fundamentally the thought in my mind is that there is nothing you can do but collaborate, because all of us need each other. I mean, this is something so basic that if we do not recognize that, and the small must recognize the compulsions of the relatively big, and the big needs to recognize the compulsions of the relatively small, And irrespective of the number of failures, for example, I think I had shared with you a list of collaborations that we had. I'll very quickly talk you through all of them. More have been failures than successes. But yet, I don't think that if you want to move ahead, you have no option but to continue to work at it and say that, let me tweak the model, let me empathize a little bit more with the partner and figure out what is actually going to work. And sitting next to me is my most recent failure. So, I'll take, but the thing is, at the end of the day, would I go back? I probably would if we are able to kind of redefine the terms a little bit, because fundamentally it makes sense. Why is Karadi Tales a children's publisher? Okay, in relative terms we may seem big, but once again it's a question of, are you the ant or are you the mouse? That's about the size difference that we are really talking about. So our first collaboration was, of course, seriously big and small. The first collaboration was actually with Tulika, where we co-published a book. There were certain things that Tulika was doing that we felt that we could not do, and there were things that Tulika felt that we were doing that they could not do. So we kind of actually co-created the Under the Banyan series, which is still, a series that works very well for both the companies. So our first venture, technically, I would still say that is a very successful
sorry, this is Tulika Chennai.
This is Tulika Chennai, sorry, yeah. The second one was a really big and small, because we went with Bennett and Coleman Group, because they approached us saying that we'd like to blow Karadi Tales, sky high. These copies of, you're selling 15,000 and 20,000 titles for each book, which is seen as huge by children's publishing standards, but that's nothing. You have to compare it with how many, let's say, pop albums we sell. That's the way to compare it. So you look at that as 1 million copies. Why are you doing 10 and 15 and 20,000? So then they put Times Music, and there was a team there that we knew well from college associations, etc. And it started off very well. But within 3 months of the collaboration, that entire team left to form TV18. And then it was with the corporate and the legal entity, and nothing happened. This was in the 2000s, 1996 was when we started, in 2001 was this. And for 3 years, this is a story that is not visible externally, is the fact that we were in courts because Times wanted to own all the IP, simply because they claimed that they had spent a lot of money and that we should compensate them for everything that they had spent. We are probably one of the very, very rare cases who actually won a court case against Times of India. But we were left horribly bruised, in the sense that you don't have money to fight. Every legal firm in Mumbai, every major legal firm in Mumbai, we lost the first 2 rounds. We won in the 3rd round, so it means it was a long battle. Every big legal firm in Mumbai had a docket from Bennett and Coleman, so they would not represent us. They cannot represent themselves against Times of India. But anyway, that is the short story, is the fact that we survived, and we once again had to climb, back up. A little bit later, we had a collaboration that still continues with Amar Chitrakeeta, in the sense that ACK was originally owned by IBH. That entire Amar Chitrakeeta was bought out by a couple of investors. The same investors felt that we had the creative house very much intact, while ACK was at that point in time the old catalogue, and nothing new was coming. So it was a joint venture that we did in a very substantial way, and the ACK still holds a small stake in Karadi Tales now. That went, I wouldn't say well, badly, but it went through a series of, people selling out their stakes, somebody else buying in, and today actually somebody as large as Future Group owns Amar Chitrakeeta. So once again, you can see how irrational that partnership itself is, because there is no way that somebody like Future Group is going to pay too much attention to something like Amar Chitrakeeta, because it's just too small. On a whim it was bought at that point in time. But our collaboration continues in several different areas. The Next thing was with HarperCollins. Once again, I don't think that a small publisher and a children's publisher can effectively distribute. I mean, we have distributed ourselves. We have had more stores when we distributed ourselves. But I still believe that the solution is to find and work out a partnership. Because at the end of the day, by the time that you finish collecting, by the time that you actually see the cost of business, it is simply not worth going out there and distributing, even if you have done a better job than your collaborators, than your partners have. And so now we are back with Amar Chitragatha, co-distributing. One of the successes, one of the big successes that is on a pilot scale, which we will be scaling up significantly, is that because of Karadi Path's association with about 3,500 schools across largely South and West India, and because we touch about 20,000 schools with a force of about 180 people on the field, we have the opportunity to actually, and we did an experiment called India Reads, which is a catalog of Indian content for children by Indian publishers. So we had Tulika Chennai, we had Amar Chitragatha, we had Fun OK Please, we had a couple of Young Zuban at that time. And this did very well because the cost of customer acquisition and library sales is very high. So your unit value needs to be, 50,000 to a lakh of rupees for it to actually be worth doing. And that is an experiment that at least I think on the fundamental parameters has succeeded. And we would be investing more the next academic year in a very substantial way in making that big, because at the end of the day, the retail space is lost. There is very little opportunity there. And picture books are not ideally e-books. I mean, they need to be felt and touched and whatever it is. And you need that physical interaction with the customer for it to succeed. So that is something that we will be taking forward once again. End of the day, I think as long as it takes, we will continue to believe that collaborations are the only, way forward on a lot of fronts, and we will continue to work at it.
What didn't work with Harper?
I think we couldn't afford a very long time for them to get on with the job. So in about 1.5 years, when the traction was not really there, we felt that we needed an alternative. Because Harper was also doing a lot of different things, and probably we felt that they had taken on more than they could really pay attention to. And we didn't want at times kind of a situation, we had learned from that you stay there for too long and at the end of the day you have no connections in the market at all, and you really can't, it takes a long time for you to kind of get back into the game.
Ananth, so you've got about 10 publishers that you're working with in terms of 14. You're sort of obviously, I don't know, always when Ananth is on my panel, he represents the big, of course. And sometimes I get upset on his behalf because I think he has a different way of looking at this. And he emailed that to me. So don't worry about sounding impolite, just say.
Don't worry, polite. I think that's the distinction. That's the distinction I was going to make. The idea of a publisher distributing or representing another publisher started when international publishers didn't have access to the Indian market as it burgeoned in the late 90s to the middle 2000 when recession happened. This market has gone through independent retail, going to chain retail, which suddenly was 10,000, 20,000 and they wanted book. Then came the advent of online, and then the decline of major chain stores and some independents. So we've seen paradigm shifts in how readers were able to buy books. And of course publishing hasn't stopped. For all things considered, the industry only has grown in size here. So I think at that point, the idea was simply to say what is the best model to get as many good books as possible to a bookstore so a reader can go buy it. That's fundamental. Is to ensure that the promises you make an author in terms of getting them to reach a larger audience is met. I won't use a word like strategy because it might seem boring. But the idea is that
Our first partnership that I remember was Faber and Faber in 1998. So you're looking at over 20 years of two publishers being able to objectively collaborate to grow market for their authors. And the model has been various, like Vish said, there have been various models. So at this present, as we speak, we do warehousing and ops for Simon & Schuster. We have full service representation where HarperCollins makes the choice, buys the books, prints some of them in India, imports most, distributes it, collects money off, manage credit control for a huge slew of publishers. We have joint imprint relationships. We have a consignment model relationship and the publisher is saying, I'm confident of the books that I publish. All I want you to manage is warehouse to bedside table and collect the money for it. And then we ourselves have joint imprint in which we get into the market. And then we represent, which is the recent phenomenon in the last 5 years, I guess, in India, is an independent publishing group, which has been my pet project for a very long time, is to say that we don't have to be a Ben-Hur. The market is not as large. Not all of us need to try to go to the same store with our small or large list. And I think that's the distinction I make by saying big or small. What is the fundamental difference? Is that a publisher publishes more books and therefore hedges more risk on a larger list than the other publisher. But within our own home, we have 4 different publishers, all of whom publish 50 to 60 books, and they have to manage their own P&L. They have to manage their own profitability. Again, I'm sounding boring. But the point is, unless you break down the large to the small, ensure the small works and bring it up, bottom up, we don't become big. The significant distinction, of course, is that we're talking to independent publishers who largely depend on creating a catalog based on Indian writing, and the money goes into that and generating revenue out of that. It is true that as a multinational publisher, we have the opportunity of the international books that we import, international authors that we represent, back up the revenue stream as it were. So today, if we've sold 500,000 copies of Subtle Art, it means that we have a foot in the door, it means that we have a stronger relationship in retail, it means that we've created a need for the retailer to, for lack of a better way to put it, maintain proper credit control, so the quantum of bestsellers keep growing. And we use that to ensure that we can get a certain amount of real estate front of store and retail. And those are the problems that we constantly work on as a consequence of not just adding people, but processes, and working on the relationship all the time is to go back to the market and say, we have solved some of the problems, and those might help other publishers ride on the bandwagon as well. It has become difficult in the children's space, especially. It takes 2 to tango. I think, like he said, at regular intervals, we need to review the nature of the relationship, the purpose of why we got into it, and is it indeed paying off at all? Yes, in the children's space it needs a lot more work, but that is the idea. So there isn't a big or small. The larger your ask, the larger your risk as well. Publishers can go back to saying we're only going to sell our books or our authors, but we collaborate because there is a need for all of us. I mean, I just learned so much just this morning, is that we all have to push the boundaries out equally across the entire pie. It can't take just 1 or 2 people to do it. And I think in a very small example in the past, Penguin was a trade publisher, PSM was an education publisher. And the constant conversation we used to have was, why does a large home which puts out say 10 million, 20 million books a year have 2 distributors in the same city? The purpose is that a book has to go from point A to point B. And we discussed in detail the opportunity to collaborate on a central warehousing based on the locational needs so that they come together. But markets are different, needs are different, and therefore you have to create different models for all of it. But I think that is the way, is that identify what's the purpose. And the purpose is to sell more books to more people. If you hear about a new Navayana title, who we represent, or a new Blaft in this instance, the customer should come first as part of our strategic conversation to say, I've published a book, I'm going to make sure that I market it. Content and communication is very, very key for the publisher to own. And those are 2 things that I will never let another collaborator have a larger say on or an equal say on too. I think it's very important to transfer editorial passion to sales. If the publisher who envisioned the idea to begin with has control over what he publishes, how he packages it, and how he markets it, because they know the voice best. That's one part of the conversation. The next is other parts of the problems we can solve. So HarperCollins manages cover design and production for one of our partners. Entirely objective. There are sufficient walls in the process where we don't have access to, we do, but we don't look at it. They have frontlist program, because our revenue planning means that we have an access to all of our publishers' frontlist program over the next 6 months. Some of them compete with us directly in terms of the authors we publish. There are authors we share with the publishers we represent. But there is a clear wall that suggests that when we go to the market, when a HarperCollins sales manager goes into the market, his focus is simply that, can a customer buy any one of our publishers' books as conveniently as possible, online, bookstore, street shop, door to door, whatever the model is to ensure that we are able to make those as many boxes checked. But it's work. So as in the case of that was work. It was that the picture book model, we had to learn the picture book model. We had to learn retail on the picture book model, which was swiftly dwindling. There was the online part. There were simple dynamics like how many copies does it take to make it profitable for the publisher and for the collaborator. Is there a cost to investing in that inventory? But those are, like I say, that's the back of the kitchen. So strategy is not simply saying, okay, let's ink a deal. The kitchen has to work supremely efficiently. But comes with the custom. It's right from the beginning, and it's been happening for 20 years.
Thanks, Ananth. I also wanted to specifically ask you about, the one that everyone's talking about recently is your the fact that Juggernaut is now going to be distributed by you. Juggernaut came into the news with this big mobile format thing. That's what everyone got excited about Juggernaut first for that reason. Over time, it's played out as, in a sense, hasn't really worked. Let's be fair. The mobile part of it. They have made their, their profits, their revenues. It's all happened because of the print part of it. When you collaborate, you don't agree?
I don't know enough about whether, I think at this juncture, 3 years down, as a mobile content creator, their focus is on acquiring customers, and they're heading very close to 1 million, and they have over 100,000 subscribers. Profitability is a matter of opinion. But
isn't it
digital aside, our relationship with Juggernaut is entirely on the print side.
Print side, right. So, it was something I was curious about, that when you get into a relationship with a particular brand that has come into the fray with, focusing on something completely new age and building that as their prominent kind of USP, that's going to be what they are going to be known for. But ultimately what works for them is the traditional model, and that's the basis of your partnership with them. Do you not consider that other end of it at all? I don't know, is this a non-question that, it doesn't bother you that part of it is not part of your purview at all?
So it's two relationships. Juggernaut as an independent company publishes books, format agnostic, so they publish for the mobile and they publish in print. Always part of their strategy. For HarperCollins' relationship with Juggernaut is two parts. One, as a retailer of digital content, our books are on the Juggernaut app.
Yeah.
Like I said, at the end of the day, if somebody wants a romance and they're a Juggernaut customer, why would I lose that real estate?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm reaching more customers for our authors.
Yeah.
And it's Juggernaut's strategy to sell those books cheap or more expensive.
Right.
We are format agnostic in how many ways and places can we have our authors' books available.
Right.
That's one relationship.
Yeah.
Juggernaut's print relationship in India was with another publishing house.
Yeah.
And they reviewed the relationship and they figured out that working with HarperCollins meant that the relationship will be better.
Yeah.
It is as we speak. And we take on additional responsibilities as well. So
Right.
it's a pure collaboration.
Right.
As part of it. So it's not just Juggernaut. We represent Juggernaut in India. We represent Manju
Yeah.
which is a large list.
Yeah.
We've just started representing Navyana.
Yeah.
And there are at least 4 UK-based independent publishers who we represent.
Right.
We represent Kashi House because of the unique content that they produce.
Yeah.
And these relationships work like that.
Also, a lot of people, at least some time ago, used to feel that when the bigs get into some kind of a relationship with the smalls, sorry to come back to those labels again, they think in terms of acquisitions always in the long run. Do you have anything to say about that?
At the moment, if it's the publisher's prerogative, at what point in their life do they seek external investment to grow the business?
But is that part of your map whenever you get into a relationship? Is there someone who does the number crunching and tells you there is potential in the future for something like that to happen? That's my job, to ask the questions about sequence.
I don't have a comment on it yet. Like I said, if the publisher's prerogative, an independent publisher suggests that at a certain point in time they would like an external investor to come in, and if the external investor is the closest collaborator, we don't have a first ask deal as part of our contract. It's a very pure objective sales or distribution or marketing or production or design or all of it or credit control. It's literally like a menu card of publishing services. And that's where I'd like to use the word big, is like I said, that there is an organization that has a certain market share, as it were.
Right.
A very good double-digit market share. HarperCollins is unique in India because we have a very successful trade publishing arm, and we are one of India's fastest growing education companies.
Right.
Under Collins Learning. 120 salespeople, 5,000 schools, and we are in that sweet spot where a school or a parent or a teacher or a customer or you or a book reader or a blogger has a wide catalog.
He excels at CEO speak, right? You won't give the answer and then he will give you information till your eyes glaze over and
5 to 7 minutes.
God, I have to get you all to speak that much.
That's the idea.
Yeah. Okay, thanks so much, Ananth. But I'm going to come back to Rakesh. I have some more time, right? Leo? So good, I can come back to you. Get in questions, yeah. But Rakesh, I want to move away from some of the CEOs and get back to you to also talk a little bit about other kind of collaborations which are equally important in our field of work, in our industry. And we often don't look at them in this way, we don't discuss them in this way. But what has been one of the most important such collaborations for a list like yours, for the new book, for instance?
I was just thinking of collaborations in terms of like editorial and working with translators, which I think when I read a translated book, like one problem that often happens in a translated book is that you can tell that the publisher has decided they want this book, they want to publish this book in translation, and they hire a translator to do it, and the translator does the job. Even they can do it pretty competently, but then the publisher will publish it. You can feel that dynamic when you read the book, and you can also, when you see a translated book, which is the translator loves the book and has decided to translate it and submitted it to the publisher, and the publisher says, okay, we'll translate this and we'll publish this, but they have not really invested, or the idea of publishing it isn't theirs. You can feel that also, I think, and the best translations really come when you can tell that the publisher wants to publish this book and wants to get it translated, and they meet a translator who wants to do the job also, and both are excited, and they sit together and sit around the book, and it's really a collaborative effort. I think that makes for good translated books, and so we've tried to do that with translations from Tamil. Our latest one is the Ayakudi Murders, with the new translator, Nirmal Rajagopalan. It's a book by Indra Soundarajan, who's a big screenwriter and novelist in Tamil. And also in the translation of a Hausa language Nigerian novel that we did, we had a very interesting collaboration with a professor at Bayero University in Khanna, Nigeria, who was very kicked about the idea of getting some Hausa literature translated into English. So that was a really interesting collaboration because we never met anybody in person. Everything was online and through email. And I mean, we would have loved to try to get to Nigeria and hope to still get there sometime. But yeah, we managed to get the whole book out with a lot of discussion and emails and online chats. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly for independent publishers, there is so much time that goes into making a book together almost, isn't it? Because you're really in touch with the author, you're hands-on editing it as well, you're giving editorial feedback, and then she's sending it back to you and you're telling her, this works, this doesn't work. If there's a translator in the fray, you're getting them to talk to each other. You're also acting as a mediator. It becomes like a fairly intense process of even before you've got the final manuscript.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's been interesting, I think, working with some people where we really sit down in a room together, side by side, looking at the computer, going over manuscripts, and sometimes having it be this distance relationship. And yeah, it can work in very different ways, but I think that translated work really works best when there's this sort of equal push from the publisher and from the translator's side.
So are you being distributed by Harper now?
No.
Didn't you just talk about the Blaft book? I'm sorry, I'm completely clueless about who's distributing you at the moment.
Nobody. I think Rakesh has us listed, but
Really?
they don't get into many stores.
Okay, interesting. Right, okay. Because, yeah, sorry, that bit of information. I should have figured that bit of information out. Prakash, they're tough to work with, but anyway, that's not true. No, we find them very tough to work with. These smalls. So, anyway. Mandy, I'm coming back to you. Is there something you've learned from the other end, from working with Popular and then with Sage? Do you think systems have got more streamlined? Okay, let me not editorialize. What do you think you might have learned?
Yes, in some ways we did learn. We got a kind of holistic view from Popular. I mean, one of the problems of indies, if I'm right here, is that we're too much editorial oriented, and we are so excited about the book we are doing that we in fact don't see many of the other things that are needed to get that book out. I think a proper organization of Popular Prakashan, Manish is here. I mean, the whole idea of, time is money, I think that was something very big and important. We spent far too much time on editorial, fixing things up. We should cut down on that. We haven't yet managed to, and especially if it's a translation, it's very, very hard to put that into a streamlined thing. And especially some of the people we work with, I mean, we've got a Dalit Lekhika anthology coming up. These are women writers from Bengal, and that's been very hard for us to put together. It's been a number of years because nobody understands what a deadline is. And some people actually send you stuff in WhatsApp. I mean, there's bits
What?
Yes.
What do you mean?
So I said, do you think you could use email? She said, what's that for? I got rid of it. Anyway, here it is in WhatsApp. You have a problem?
Are you saying she sent you an entire manuscript?
Yeah, in bits and pieces. There was another one who tried Excel. Yes. Yes, she had that software, so she used it. And I don't know, I'm the wrong person to handle these crises because I'm fairly illiterate in technology, but I had people who were highly tech savvy, and I said, do you think this can be converted? And they said, no. No, not the Excel, they had to type that out. But these kinds of things, I think when you're working with a larger organization, they tell you about schedules, they tell you about how if you've spent 10 years doing something, it's really, you've lost everything. Those kinds of things we did learn from Popular. From Sage, again, a little more professionalism. Some things we have found very hard to grapple with. I don't know if you have that. Isn't there 120-word blurb? Whatever.
Yeah.
And then
But Mandy, you forget I tweet, so it's easier for me.
oh well, and things like that. But yeah, there too, their system of a timeline that's been good for us. So I think there has been give and take. There has to be. Otherwise, they would find it very hard to work with us. So we do respond. We make ourselves respond if you don't understand something. We ask them. They don't like being asked too many questions, I notice, but we do ask them. So yes, we have learned from them too, yeah. Especially the marketing aspect. And the authors, it was in a way a learning process for me to see how excited the authors were to have this collaboration. All this talk of being independent and anti-globalization and whatever, they were quite happy to be globalized. And that was a learning thing. And they have also, it's easy to say, well, you cannot spend 2 months doing this proof. Well, you wouldn't if it were us anyway, but now you definitely can't. That kind of thing has helped us. What else is that? Oh, and they love it that they've got higher royalties. And here I have been conscience-stricken that had I been better at marketing on my own, they would have got better royalties. And we've really, in a way, made Kancha Ilaya this author, and we've reprinted him 14 times on our own. No, it hasn't been 250 copies, as I heard someone else say. It has generally been about at least 1,000, if not 2,000 at a time. But with Sage, he's gone places, right? And he ran up in excitement talking about the lakhs of royalties he's got. So these are things one has to, one is culpable in a way.
Yeah, I think authors who've always been very happy with us with the editorial process and very unhappy with the marketing and the royalties end are suddenly happy with us. That's a big, big learning, I think. Yeah.
Kancha is due, he never complained about royalties, and lots of them didn't. But the fact is you did deprive them, right? We couldn't do the market for them.
We just
square the market for them.
Yeah. The readership has just grown exponentially. With us at least, what I find really very, very gratifying is that the day the book goes live on Sage India, it also goes live on Sage UK and Sage USA platforms, which is like a massive deal for my authors,
With the authors like Kancha and Manoranjan Bapari and we have Kartika here, it's been very exciting for them. And for Kancha, for instance, we used to get postcards from jails saying, I don't have the money, but I want this book, please send it.
Right. Vish, what I want to ask you next is really just for you on this panel, because you're kind of, having done what you've done with Current Details, you've always been, you've been doing convergence before convergence became known as a buzzword, right? And I think that is why your views are also very clear about collaboration, because when you do convergence, that is the basis of it. Going forward, you think we're going to, now that audiobooks are becoming, they are becoming big in some way, or perhaps they'll take a little longer. Of course, you've done them before everyone else. Do you think we're going to see interesting new collaborations in this convergent space? Do you have any sense? Are there any would you, hazard a guess about some interesting formats that you think emerging?
See, if you think about it, there aren't a whole lot of, there isn't that many varieties. Basically, you just say that, okay, these are the sense organs that we have. And so as long as you cover all the sense organs, basically that is convergence, at the end of the day. And then it's a question of what is the medium through which you appeal, whether it is to the ear, to the eye, to the brain, or whatever it is. And right in the beginning, You can talk about the cassette version of Curry Details, you can talk about the CD version of Curry Details, you can talk about the USB version of Curry Details, and now you can talk about the fully digital version and via the app that can go. But what this actually offers us is a huge opportunity to actually know every customer, especially the current technological trends, because we have also with us the unique opportunity of actually having 3 different sources from where I have customers. There are customers for Karadi Path who come into my app, and hence I uniquely identify them, which if I was just selling to the school, I wouldn't know. And these are people who are already familiar with your brand, respect you, have gained some credibility with them. Karadi Tales can ride on top of that, and then every Karadi Tales family basically owns the brand quite passionately. It's not a very large number, but the ownership is so large that one feels that we are, huge. I mean, once you start selling, you know what the real numbers are. Once again, because of the lack of opportunities of retail presence, and convenience of retail presence, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities where you have a lot of customers, the ability to actually give the customer a chance to come back and buy your second book, your third book, your fourth book, because of the fact that via a QR code they have come in, they have said that, so you tell them that you'll get the audio of this book, once you come via this channel. So you create all the layers in which that text can actually be brought alive, whether it's in illustration, whether it's in the writing itself, and whether it's in the audio, whether it's in the music that accompanies the audio. So our audio books are very different from the definition of audio, because there's a lot of work that goes into the narrative. So why do you need Nasiruddin Shah to actually tell the story? Simply because he brings a very different dimension to the storytelling itself. So you invest a lot in the creative process, and that's something that we have never shied away from. And in the sense that people would be very surprised that in a children's book, how are you putting so much in the upfront? But it has paid off. I mean, it has paid off, and it pays off over a period of time. And hence, I'm actually going back to what Mr. Manas said yesterday. At the end of the day, you have to be able to manage the cash flow in the beginning, but later on it is cash flow, because what we published 23 years ago, we continue to sell, as if there is no, it does have a spike, and then it comes down, and then there is a kind of a steady stream of revenue. So it's really a question of, do you have the ability to take the risk and invest that much? But convergence itself is, I think, a huge advantage. And more and more, when we look at Mandira was talking about the manuscript coming in the WhatsApp form, I think that we may find that youngsters are very happy about receiving this in different forms. And I find that the way that, a 15-year-old wants the world and wants his experience to be are different from the way that we have experienced it. So I have to learn from that and say, okay, how can I think ahead and say that, how do I actually map to that? Especially with children, technology being what it is, I can keep on talking about, just the feel of the book. But if I can bring you to the physical book via, by enticing you using technology, that would be a great movement forward. So convergence, actually, we have to figure out, like anything, there is a good and bad side to it. You figure out, okay, what are the good things that I can make of this? As I said right in the beginning, whether it's a video form or whether it's an audio form or whether it's a text form, I think those things are already defined. It's simply a question of how the medium is actually changing through which. And now the medium is actually far more accessible than it ever was. I don't have to give a CD, I don't have to give a USB. My cost comes down in terms of the physical product. I'm environmentally more friendly because I'm not putting out that much physical. And at the end of the day, it's a headphone that's going to go on, and all that the child or the parent has done is they've downloaded the audio. They have the physical book, they've downloaded the audio. So I'm able to give them an audio book without giving them a CD or any of the requirements there. So cost comes down, access goes up. I see a lot of good things arising out of this.
I'm going to actually throw it open to questions now, because I did an extra question to Ananth before I went back to Rakesh. Does someone have a mic for the... Any questions? Yes, lady in the back.
Hello, I'm Monita Gurung. I'm a children's literature publisher from Nepal. I think I have a very specific question for CP sir, but I mean it's open to everybody. So, what practices have Karaji Tales been doing apart from publishing books? What awareness program have you all been involved in any kind of awareness program, especially on use of picture book? And also, how much percentile or share of resources should a publishing house be spending on these kind of programs? Maybe for small publishing houses, what would be the correct bar of share that we should be investing?
Well, I'm going to just take a couple of more questions. And also, can I just, I'll let this question pass, but since the idea, the theme of this panel was collaboration, can we try and, see if the questions relate more to that? Yes. Yes.
My question is also to CP sir, but I wanted to understand a little bit about your experience on the collaboration which you had for the making of that film, Gupi Gavaiya Baja Bajaiya. How is that? Because films are very tricky, and it was, I think, the first children's film for adults. So I just wanted to understand how was your experience on that.
One more question. We'll just take the questions and then we'll... Any other questions? Okay, we'll start.
I will briefly answer the first question. I don't think that we really know what that person should be. It is something that you organically discover. At least that's the way that, and it really depends on the scale and the access that you have. In terms of the marketing, see, picture books, India really, when it comes to children's content, jumped from print directly to the digital medium. I mean, there weren't, a few of the intermediate steps. And picture book as a category is a really, really small category. And a lot of people don't know to differentiate between art in a picture book and an animated, a representation of the text in a picture book. So the genre is something that we are also learning, because I think this is a very mature genre in some of the other countries, whether it is both in the East and the West. We have seen some fantastic work that's been done, and we are learning from it as to how the picture must tell multiple stories, how the pictures must have layers. So both with the author, even in terms of writing and illustrating, it's a process that we are discovering. So I think there is a very long journey that actually happens in the creation of the picture book itself. And then you have to sensitize the customer. So this happens more through workshops that we do for librarians to begin with, and with educators who are largely working with preschool age children as to what is the value of the picture book. Because when you are going to give them a book with 50 words in it and say that this is going to cost you 250 rupees, the first thing is, isme 50 word hai aur 250 rupees, that simply doesn't make sense. So that's, you have to empathize with the customer at that point, that until and unless I am able to present the value to the customer, I can't expect the customer to pay. So you have to work hard, and I think there are a few others who are also doing lots of workshops. We do events, we do workshops, we work, it's almost like a continuous process that we have. We have at least 2 events a month. I'm not sure whether this is working for us commercially, but at the end of the day, because of the fact that the Karadi brand has 2 streams of, basically revenue, the Karadi brand the growth of the brand is always something that's going to be, at some point of time or the other, worth the effort that we do. With GGBB or Gopi Gavaya Baga Bajaya, it's a classic Satyajit Ray's Gopika and Bagabain, and so it was created actually by CFSI, but as we, and that was a collaborative process with CFSI, but CFSI makes but never disseminates. Yeah. So with the result that nobody really sees, and there's some fantastic work that's been done. Here we really went out on a limb because CFSI has never ever licensed their content to anybody else, and Karadi Tales was the first company where we managed to, because we were integrally involved in the production of it. We could never have financed. In India, children's film itself means, commercial viability is low. Now you put children's animation film, the viability is extraordinarily low. So at the end of the day, GGBB was pure passion, commercial idiocy, but you don't ask commercial questions when you know going in that this is not a place where you're really going to make a lot of money. I mean, you do it simply because it is worth doing, and we had a fabulous set of animators, especially the lead animator and director Shilpa. I mean, if somebody has not watched the film, please go ahead. It is there on. It will come on most of the online platforms very soon. The art in animation is something that has won worldwide acclaim, and it was worth doing a theatrical release. Simply because if we don't do a theatrical release, the Amazons and the Netflixes will not respect it. So just for that reason, we invested money in the theatrical release. What we spent, we didn't even get back 10% of that through ticket sales. But I think over a period of time, once again, it's a question of the ability to actually invest a little bit ahead of the curve and then exploit it over a longer period of time that makes some of these projects viable eventually. But the GGBB was a fabulous creative process more than anything else.
Kartika.
I just wanted to ask about the other direction collaboration could go in, which is you all talked about small working with big. What about all the smalls working together to become big?
There have been so many efforts in that direction, actually. Ritu, do you want to talk about it? So, Ritu, if I can just add one thing, one major collaboration which I consider very important as well, and idiotically I left it out, is my collaboration with Mayday Bookstore and Leftward. I mean, my collaboration with corner bookstores, I still call them corner bookstores. I think those are successful, super successful collaborations between small and small, because we promote each other. Trilogy is another example for Bombay. We keep in touch with what new things we are doing so that they can talk up for me and I can talk up for them. Social media has made that easy. I don't know if that's important for anyone, but I think that really works. But yeah, but Ritu, can Ritu just add?
See, I think that actually this is something that several of us have been talking about for some time now, and in my view, speaking for myself, we have no option but to have small collaborations. And my reason for saying so may be very different from the reasons that have been given by the panel. I think that small independents, if they want to have continuity and survive as independents, we have no choice but to merge with small ones. We don't have time now, but perhaps tomorrow we can discuss this. It's no use our pretending that there's no such thing as big and small. I take Vish's point. The impact is enormous. There is absolutely no doubt about the fact that in India, over the last 30 years, the impact that the small independents have made has been huge. The risks that we have taken have been huge. But look at what has come into the market as a result. And I'm talking about, I hate the word content, but I'm talking about what we have produced. Who has brought all these writers? Not the big fellows, not the mainstream, because we know that the risks are taken on the margins. When you're on the margins is when you can take the risk. I do not agree with Ananth that the big fellows have more to lose. No. You do not have more to lose because you have many more safety nets. We have very few. So to get back to the point that Kartika raised, Kartika, how dare you steal our idea? The point is
We don't have a choice. The big question, though, Kartika, is will the smalls, when they merge, not smalls, independents, when they merge or when they come together, will they actually ever become big? That's the question.
Now, Ritu, we've tried it. You've tried it.
We tried it only we tried it only for distribution, not for anything else. And we tried it for distribution because all the large, and here I want to expand on that business of big and small. The distributors are not interested in the small independent publishers because we produce less than 100 titles a year. It doesn't work for them. They don't have the turnover, they don't have the return, they don't have the margins, they are not interested. Now, if they are not interested, what do we do? Where do we go? We came together for that reason, but we encountered the same problem when it comes to collections. We are not big enough. So, they will pay the HarperCollins, they will pay the Penguin Random House because that's where their big sellers are, and they will reserve the money for us. Why has no one talked about the fact that Crossword never pays? Why has no one talked about the fact that Oxford Bookstore never pays? And by goodness, that is Swaraj Paul. That's no poor man there. But who does he not pay? He doesn't pay the smaller publisher.
He doesn't pay anyone.
He doesn't pay anyone, but people still go there. Why? Okay, they are taking remainder stock. Maybe. But I'm saying let's not gloss over the difference between big and small. In real life, small means you're at the bottom of the list. So we have to come together. I don't see a choice. But I'm not sure that the choice is big and small. I'm also not sure that the choice is small and small. And I'm very interested to hear Vish calling himself small.
After he had made the distinction between small, smaller, smallest, after that, then he called himself small. So that tells you a lot. But Mandy wanted to add one point. Leo, can we let her just add one? Okay, Vish as well. Huh? Possible?
I take a little bit of objection to Arpita's, derogatory reference to CEO speak. The smalls must think.
That wasn't derogatory.
The smalls
it
must
was provocative
think,
to make him speak.
The smalls must think CEO-like also. See, what happens is that very often we get so carried away with the passion that we do not remember that somebody has to buy the book for which the access has to be there. So unless we are going to be looking at some point, you have to say that, do I have enough books that have a positive P&L that I can then support books that don't have that P&L? Unfortunately, the smalls replicate both the strengths and the weaknesses of each other, which is why the collaborations actually don't come about. I mean, attempts have been made, and I would simply say that India Reads, which is the library catalog for schools of children's publishers, is something that I think has the best opportunity of succeeding based on the pilot that we have done. So the smalls, and Karadi Tales, the moment you look at the size of the P&L, you will realize that it is small. The impact is large, but we are still a very small entity.
Not derogatory at all, but provocative, because if I'm not the agent provocateur here, he won't say anything. Not that he said much, but I winked at him right now, which you couldn't see. Mandy, last word to you.
It's not much of a last word. I mean, in an ideal situation, yes, smalls together would be great. The problem is that old-fashioned thing called money. I mean, we all have very little capital, and being unfunded, I mean, that's how we all started doing our small business. We know where that's taken us. So we need capital from somewhere. Maybe we win a lottery or something. Or maybe the big ones just 1 year give us their revenue. Something like that.
Okay, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you all for being such an engaged audience. Thank you, Vinita, Leo.
Thank you, Arpita, for moderating this very energetic discussion. Thank you all for being here. We'd like to present a token of our thanks. This is the traditional Goan textile weave. I know so many of us have heard this, but I must mention it because some of us were not here yesterday. The traditional Goan textile weave